Okay, this is going to be our final part of the 20th New York State Militia inside of the Soldiers National Cemetery, looking at their graves, and our next part on the video series. And I'm here in the New York plot. As we turn from looking at the Soldiers National Cemetery, I'm going to go to Section A, Site 1 in the New York plot. And this is the grave of Private Leonard Van Gorder. Leonard Van Gorder was in Company E of the 20th New York State Militia. He was born in 1843, and he died on July 1st, 1863. And he is buried in the very first grave of Section A, Site 1. Next to him is buried one of his pards, and this would be Private George H. Babcock, of Company E. Babcock survived day 1 to be killed on July 3rd, 1863. He's buried in Section A of the New York plot, Site number 2. And another mistake here is that it says C.H. Babcock instead of G.H. and it isn't worn. It's definitely a C on here. So again, most likely what happened was when the information was being transferred from the wooden headstones over to the gravestones of the that were made out of stone, that air that had worn, so there was an error made. So that brings us down to our final and 12th person buried here. I think I said 11 at the beginning of my video series. I meant to say 12. And again, as we cross by the graves of Sergeant Decker and Sergeant Lucius Decker, 2 graves down is the final one that we're going to look at today. And this is the grave of Private James L. Halleck of Company, looks like C or G on the original records, 20th New York State Militia. He was born in 1841. He was killed on July 3rd, 1863 at Cemetery Ridge, and he's buried here today in Section C of the New York plot, Site 24. So that has been a look at the 12 members of the 20th New York State Militia that are buried here at Gettysburg. And as a little bonus, okay, this is going to be our next part of the 20th New York State Militia at Gettysburg, and my camera ran out of space there, so it cut off on me. So I'm going to continue it here. As an added bonus, I want to talk about 2 little tidbits here. After we're leaving the grave of Halleck and right here next to Decker. If you just turn 1 row back from the Decker's grave, you'll come over here to the grave of Sergeant Amos Humstead of the 154th New York, and he's one of the more famous burials here at Gettysburg because, of course, the story where he had his pictures of his 3 children, and we did a video series about Amos Humstead. But the real bonus here is that there was a man, just as Seward is an expert at the 20th New York State Militia. I've spent 15 years of researching my great-grandfather's regiment, the 23rd Pennsylvania. And there was a man in the 23rd Pennsylvania Volunteers in Company B named William Schuttretter. And he was a German immigrant, and he moved to Philadelphia, and he signed up with Bernie Zuav's in 1861. He was a participant in the Battle of Gettysburg, and he was so moved by the carnage, he was so moved by what happened here on July 1st, 2nd, and 3rd, 1863, that after the Civil War was over, he moved to Adams County to Table Rock, which is just north, or was a little town just north of Gettysburg. Today, Table Rock Road runs in the general vicinity of the one-time village of Table Rock, Pennsylvania, just north of the town. But Schuttretter wanted to be closer, and eventually he bought a home in Gettysburg, him and his wife. His wife actually inherited a home, I should say. And they lived there the remainder of their lives. And William was so moved by what happened here at Gettysburg that one of the things he did was he would come to the National Cemetery every day for the rest of his life. And he had once mentioned in diaries that he had laid flags down in the early 1900s at every single grave. So of course every grave of every man and every Union man in the state who was buried here, William Schuttretter put an American flag over their grave and paid honor and tribute to them. And when he died, he actually was buried here in the National Cemetery. However, since he wasn't killed at the Battle of Gettysburg, he wasn't buried in the section that surrounded the Soldiers' National Monument. So that means William actually paid tribute, as we've done today, to the graves of these brave men of the 20th New York State Militia. And ironically enough, if you're standing here, Section A, Site 1 and 2, at the graves of Van Gorder and Babcock, and you look straight back, literally 10 yards, you will see the grave of William Schuttretter. He's got a small stone here, and it doesn't even have the unit or the company designation, but that is his grave. He was a private in Company B of the 23rd Pennsylvania Volunteers, and this man actually would come to the cemetery every single day of his life because he was here at the Battle of Gettysburg and he experienced the carnage and could never get it out of his mind. He was like many of us who may have been from a different state and a different town and wanted to eventually journey and make our way here because of the special place that Gettysburg is. So as we've tried to do today, we pay tribute to not only the 20th New York State Militia, but to all the men buried in this cemetery. But today it is a tribute to the men, to the 12 men of the 20th New York State Militia as we continue our video series here. This has been the 20th New York State Militia on Gettysburg Battlefield Ultimate.